I can't imagine what it would be like to grow up without a mother. I had a beautiful relationship with my mum. She was always there for me. There's a young woman in Victoria whose mum was cruelly taken from her when she was just 6 years old. While she slept, her mum was murdered, possibly inside their home.
She wouldn't have opened the door to a stranger.
Who killed Belinda Williams? Was it her ex-partner?
Was he jealous? I imagine he probably would have been.
Her ex-boss?
There was one occasion when he'd made a pass at her.
Or someone else?
The mother of a woman murdered 16 years ago is hoping a $1 million award will help catch her daughter's killer.
I just never sleep.
This is a live police investigation. With your help, we can bring Belinda's killer to justice.
Detective Superintendent Deborah Wallace rose to the top of the New South Wales Police Force with grace, humour and an iconic sense of style.
The person that was shot is known to police.
In her incredible 37 years in the force,
Police search warrant!
Wallace took on murderers, drug suppliers and bikie gangs.
All cases can be solved. They're never cold. And they never give up. I'm heading to the small Victorian town of Buninyong, 10 kilometres south of Ballarat. The town lies in the shadow of an extinct volcano, which rises to 745 metres, high enough to get winter snow. Mount Buninyong plays a central role in this story. And so does this house, which you can only see from the air. It's hidden behind bushland down a private dirt road on the outskirts of town. It may have been where a young mother, Belinda Williams, was strangled to death. I'll return to the house and the mountain a bit later. But first, I'm catching up with Belinda's mother, Shirley, to find out more about the daughter who was cruelly taken from her in 1999. Tell me about Belinda. What was she like as a baby?
She was a sweet little baby. She didn't have any hair at all until she was about 3, and then she got curls.
And what did she like doing?
As she grew up, well, she liked all sorts of things. When she went to Ballarat High School, she was cox in the rowing, and she also played hockey. She won an award for fashion design and expert sewer.
Belinda considered a career as a hat maker, but instead she pursued another passion, cooking.
Her and a couple of her girlfriends, they started a little catering business called the Chefettes.
How old was she then when she was doing that?
Oh, she's about 18, 19.
In the 80s, Belinda was a waitress at some of Ballarat's best restaurants. She also started dating a man who would become the father of her child. His name is David Coventry. And what was David like? What were they like together as a couple?
Oh, they were a lovely couple. He was quiet and they had sort of lots of things in common, cooking and things like that.
In 1993, David and Belinda had a child. We can't tell you her name. That's subject to a suppression order. What was the bond like between Belinda and her daughter?
Oh, it was lovely, yeah. She was a beautiful mother. She just was a beautiful mother. Mm.
Wow. I believe she doted on her
Yeah,
daughter.
she did, yeah.
The little girl grew to love the same things as her mum.
Belinda had taught her to cook at 6, and she could do roast lamb with garlic and rosemary in it at that age. Belinda had taught her to sew as well. She was a lovely mother.
But Belinda's relationship with her partner David was not going so well. They separated, and in May 1999, Belinda moved to Buninyong. And the child stayed with your daughter Belinda?
Yes, she did, yeah.
And David would have regular access?
All the time.
Was he a regular visitor to the home?
Yes, yeah.
So
He was.
would you describe it as an amicable separation?
Yes, but it wasn't sort of a permanent breakdown. They would have ended up back together.
Not so, says Belinda's brother Bruce.
They did have a relationship, but I don't believe in my mind that that relationship was going to be reconnected. Belinda had pretty much moved on from the relationship with David. She'd made the decision it was over.
My next destination is Victoria Police Headquarters in Spencer Street, Melbourne. Over the years, I've worked closely with VicPol on a number of cross-border investigations. But today, I'm meeting with John Roger to talk about Belinda Williams's case. Can you tell me where you were and what you were doing in 1999?
Yes, in 1999 I was a detective sergeant at the Victoria Police Missing Persons Unit. Basically, suspicious disappearances.
When Belinda went missing, Detective Senior Sergeant John Roger ran the investigation. So I asked him what happened on that fateful day.
It was the 25th of June 1999. Belinda had a couple of friends over at night for a couple of drinks. Her daughter was a bit unsettled, perhaps because of the temperature, the wind, the dark, whatever it was. She was only a young child. And she came through a couple of times during the night to see her mother, who was having a glass of wine with her friends, and said she was unsettled. So Belinda said that she'd put her back in bed, tuck her in, and then later on when her friends went, she would come in and lie with her to settle her and make her feel more comfortable. She went back, had a drink with her friends. I think they left at around 9:30 that evening. The house appeared to be locked up. And she went and lay down with her daughter to settle her and give her some comfort. In the morning, her daughter woke up and her mother wasn't there.
That particular morning it was really sunny and cold, and I was sitting in my bedroom and the sun was streaming in, and I thought, everything's going right now. Everything's good. The next thing I get a call, and that was the end of everything.
first person to realise that Belinda Williams was missing was her 6-year-old daughter. On the morning of Saturday, June 26, 1999, she woke to an empty house. The little girl went to her mother's bedroom, but there was no sign of Mum. In the kitchen, Mum's car keys were hanging in the usual place, and the car was parked outside. Everything seemed normal, except it wasn't. In a panic, the 6-year-old rang her dad, David, and he came straight over.
So everything was normal in the house. The car was still there. The house was locked from the outside. There was no sign of any struggle. So it was, to all intents and purposes, it was a mystery.
David didn't notify the local police that Belinda was missing until 2 p.m.
They contacted the crime department, which we were part of in Melbourne, and the missing persons unit to go up there and have a look at the investigation and see what we could do.
Friday night, Belinda Williams' 6-year-old daughter woke to find her mother missing from their Buninyong home.
It really is unusual. Like, a car is still there. Everything leads to either she's wandered off or something untoward has happened to her.
It's just devastating. It's, you know, you're just thinking of, you know, who could have taken her.
During the weekend, police and state emergency service workers searched local reserves, mine shafts and creek crossings with no success. They also conducted a door knock of nearby houses.
We crawled through drains under the highway, we crawled through blackberry bushes, we visited mine shafts, we drove around all night. But I think after 2 or 3 days I was pretty sure then that the worst had happened.
11 days after the search began, it ended tragically, with the discovery of Belinda's body high up on Mount Buninyong.
Police attended the scene last night after a local couple came across the body yesterday afternoon while on a bushwalk, when they spotted an item on the side of the road which aroused their suspicions. They investigated down a slope where they sighted the body.
I really, in my own mind, had reconciled myself to the fact that something had happened to Belinda one way or the other. It's a pretty soul-destroying situation.
I've organised a meeting with Detective Stephen Kelly, who is in charge of the re-investigation into the murder of Belinda Williams. I believe the coroner's findings were she was strangled. I think that was how she was killed. Is that correct?
Yes, the official cause of death was asphyxiation. There was no other signs of trauma to the body.
But where was Belinda strangled? Was it up on Mount Buninyong? I want to ask Stephen for more detail about the bushwalkers who found Belinda's body.
They saw a windsheeter on the ground and that was a bit out of place. They had a look at that. And they've noticed some footprints around the windsheeter leading down a steep embankment. So they had a look down that embankment. And in the undergrowth, they saw a human foot.
How far from her home would that have been, roughly?
5 or 7 kilometres.
Some distance. She couldn't have walked there.
No, and her body was found in a blue nightgown. So no woman would walk around at night in a blue nightgown.
Yeah. Belinda's daughter told police her mum wasn't wearing a nightgown when she last saw her at home on the night of June 25.
Mum hopped into her bed. After the friends had left, Belinda was wearing a T-shirt and underpants and socks.
Which means Belinda got changed into her nightgown after that. However, there's no evidence that she slept in her bed. And there's no evidence that points to how she left the house, late, on that cold winter's night. A mother just wouldn't leave a child alone.
No, absolutely.
With no sign of forced entry, police believe that she received a visitor after putting her daughter to bed.
She's home alone, she's dressed like that with a young child. She wouldn't have opened the door to a stranger. More than likely it would have been someone that she was familiar with, or at least comfortable enough to allow into the house.
It's entirely possible that Belinda was strangled to death inside her home by someone she knew, which makes the house the primary crime scene. One thing I've learned from years of detective work is when you arrive at a crime scene, you don't touch anything. You leave it to forensics. So what happened at the crime scene where Belinda Williams possibly met her end? Let's go back to Saturday, June 26, the day Belinda was reported missing. Belinda's brother Bruce raced to Mount Buninyong as soon as he heard the news.
I arrived at Belinda's place. It was just on dark, so it would have been about 6 o'clock back in that particular time, given that that was probably at least 12 hours since, she'd disappeared. I knew that something was up. I effectively treated the place as a crime scene, and I remember walking into the back door of the house with my hands in my pockets because I didn't want to touch anything. And I walked in up the back steps into her kitchen, and there were two people in the kitchen washing dishes and cleaning down the kitchen. And that was the sort of the beginning of what I felt was just a crazy situation.
How many people all up would you have said was in the house?
I think at that time there would have been about a dozen people. I just felt the whole thing was just bizarre. In my mind it was a crime scene, and yet it was a house full of people. It was like being in the Twilight Zone where I was the only one there that realised what the hell was going on. I can remember walking out to the front of the house, and Belinda's bedroom window, it was quite a big window. And there was one set of handprints on the window, as if somebody had leant forward to look through the window. I think by the time the forensic squad had arrived, the Sunday night or the Monday morning, which is within a day and a half of her disappearing, there were 4 or 5 sets of handprints on that same window. And that made it really difficult for them to do their job.
Police were faced with a seriously contaminated crime scene. And 3 people, who would become persons of interest in the murder of Belinda, were in her house on the day she was reported missing.
They were all there. They were all in the house at the same time. They were all in various rooms in Belinda's place. So whatever they were doing, whatever their motivation for being there was, they could all justify why they were there.
In my very first murder investigation, I faced the sad truth that most murder victims are killed by someone they know. In 2005, the Victorian State Coroner found that Belinda Williams was most likely murdered by someone she knew. So who are the suspects? The first person of interest is David Coventry, Belinda's ex and the father of her daughter.
They'd been together for quite a long time. They'd been building a house over a long period of time. Belinda had made the decision that she didn't want to live in a barn anymore. She'd made the decision it was over. She'd asked David to consider selling the property. I don't think David was particularly happy about that.
Much to David's disappointment, Belinda wasn't interested in getting back together with him. In fact, at the time of her murder, she was in a relationship with another man, Norman McGlashan. What do you know of him?
Oh, look, I didn't know Norman very much at all. He seemed like a nice, quiet sort of a chap.
In evidence given before the coroner, Norman helped Belinda move from Ballarat to Buninyong about 6 weeks prior to her murder. He stayed with Belinda and her daughter for 5 weeks before going back to Melbourne where he lived. But they'd made plans to catch up on the weekend Belinda disappeared. Belinda rang Norman McGlashan twice on the 25th of June. They were quite long conversations.
Yes, they had some discussions about her arrangement the next day. She was going to travel to Melbourne and spend the weekend with him. They were both looking forward to that very much. By all accounts, they were very fond of each other.
Belinda never made it to Melbourne. Let's recap her final hours and the interactions she had with her ex, David Coventry. She rang David on the Friday to ask if he could look after their daughter while she went to Melbourne to stay with her new boyfriend.
He could take the child back to his place and the child could stay the night there, and that way she could get away early in the morning.
But Belinda had a change of heart when one of the mums from her daughter's school offered to pick up the 6-year-old on the Saturday morning. That meant the child could stay at home with her on the Friday night. Belinda discussed the new plans in another call to David on the Friday night, within earshot of her girlfriends who'd come over for a few glasses of wine.
Belinda rang him back and she was in the process of putting the child to bed, so she said that he need not come over.
That phone call didn't end well, did it?
The phone call was overheard at the end of it by a friend who was present, and by that friend's account, Belinda had told her that he had hung up on her.
So he wasn't happy that the plans had changed?
Well, he'd hung up on her. I can't speculate as to how unhappy or happy or upset he was about that.
Do you think David knew about the relationship and could he have been jealous?
I would be surprised if David didn't know about that relationship. Belinda wasn't secretive or anything like that. Was he jealous? I imagine he probably would have been.
Police think Belinda was visited by her killer sometime after she changed into her nightgown, ready to go to bed. Up on Mount Buninyong, where her body was discovered, there was a crucial piece of evidence to support that theory.
When her body was found, there was a silver earring that was found beside her body, and at the house, that matching earring was found in the hallway on the carpet. Given that, there may have been some type of altercation or assault that has occurred at the house that's caused that earring to dislodge.
I've been up to where Belinda's remains were found. I went the long way, but when I got to Belinda's house, I discovered there was another road that leads up to where she was located, which you really wouldn't know if you didn't live there.
No, there's a really rough bush track that goes pretty much from where Belinda was living at the time up the side to the Buninyong tourist road. Anyone local to the area would know about the road.
David Coventry told police he was at home alone on the night Belinda disappeared. He lived in close proximity to Belinda and Mount Buninyong.
As the crow flies, it's probably only a couple of kilometres away from where Belinda was living. To get there, you know, it's probably a 8 or 10 minute drive.
I want to go back to the moment when David Coventry received a phone call from his 6-year-old daughter when she realised her mother wasn't in the house. That was at 8:45 a.m. on the Saturday morning. David went straight to the house, but he didn't report Belinda's disappearance to the police until 2 p.m.
I just found it very strange that it took so long for him to start calling around. If I'd arrived at my daughter's home and she was 6 or 7 and there was and her mother wasn't there and the back door was open, I'd be concerned immediately.
When the search for Belinda began in earnest, Bruce drove up Mount Buninyong to look for his sister. This was a place that he and Belinda used to visit as kids.
I said, look, I'm going to go for a drive to the top of Mount Buninyong, just on the off chance that she may be sitting on the side of the road or something. It was interesting because David insisted he wanted to come with me. Now, as it turned out, Belinda's body was found on the on the road on the way up to the top of the mountain.
So would it be true to say that you even would have driven past?
Oh yeah, I'd obviously, if her body was there at the time and given that that was the next day, you might assume that her body was there by that stage. But I definitely drove within 40 or 50 metres of where she was found.
We make no allegations against David Coventry. We approached him several times, hoping to interview him for this program, but he didn't return our calls. David Coventry is not the only person of interest in the murder of Belinda Williams. Let's examine the second suspect. We'll call him Witness 4, because that's how the police refer to him. And at the time of Belinda's murder, Witness 4 had a girlfriend. She's Witness 5. So how did Belinda meet Witness 4?
Belinda rented a property in Ballarat, and Witness 4 was a previous tenant there. And that's how she came to know him, become acquainted with him, and his partner, Witness 5.
The three knew each other through work as well.
Belinda worked with Witness 5 in a local hotel. Belinda had done a lot of waitressing over in her working life, and they'd been friends for quite a while. And the person that they both worked for was Witness 4.
Was there tension between Belinda and Witness 4?
There was one occasion when he'd made a pass at her, and she made it clear in no uncertain terms that she was not interested in a relationship with him, and that if he tried that on again, then she would let Witness 5 know.
I knew that there'd been an issue with him. Belinda had mentioned to me before about this guy that she was working for, and they'd had some words on a couple of occasions. And there'd been possibly, there'd been a suggestion of some violence.
But was Belinda's threat to out Witness 4 for his predatory behaviour enough to motivate him to kill her?
He's certainly a prime candidate. Maybe he was continuing to pursue Belinda and, I don't know, but I was immediately suspicious of, because I was aware of the situation that had been going on prior to Belinda's disappearance.
Let's go back to the drinks party that Belinda hosted for two girlfriends at her place on the night she disappeared. One of those women is Witness 5, who agreed to drive Belinda down to Melbourne the next day to meet her new boyfriend, Norman.
There were several phone calls between witness 4 and 5 at Belinda's place.
Are you aware what they were about?
What's been reported is that there was conversations about when she was going to come home. Did she want to be picked up by him? Yeah, so he'd rung there a few times.
Witness 4 was aware of what was going on in the house that night, and as Belinda's 2 girlfriends were leaving at about 9:30 p.m, she showed them where she'd put a spare key, in the meter box. We make no allegations against Witness 4 and whether he knew where the spare key to Belinda's house was located. What we can confirm is that Witness 4 and 5 were both back at Belinda's the next day, cleaning the house, after she disappeared.
I asked them what they were doing, and the comment was made to me, oh, we don't want people to think that Belinda was a bad housekeeper, which was just a bizarre thing to say. I mean, you know, I'm thinking that my sister's possibly been murdered. And I made the comment to 4 and 5 that they needed to get the fuck out of the joint.
I want to move the focus to one of Belinda's neighbours. There was another house on the other side of the private dirt road, difficult to see through the trees. And the people who lived there in 1999 told the police there was some unusual activity on the night that Belinda disappeared.
A couple in a house adjacent to hers said that their dogs barked for a 40-minute period or a half-hour period about 2 o'clock in the morning. That was something the dogs didn't usually do.
What the neighbour told the police about the barking dogs is interesting, because he told a different story to Belinda's brother Bruce.
He made the comment to me that he would have heard his dogs barking, but he didn't hear anything.
Bruce was immediately suspicious of the neighbour when he arrived at the house.
I was mindful of that. I thought this was a crime scene potentially, and I remember walking to Belinda's bedroom just to walk in and see what was going on. And I turned around and the next door neighbour's standing behind me, like he followed me into the bedroom. And then I think the next day I crawled underneath Belinda's house, and next thing I knew he was following me under the house. Strange character. He seemed fascinated, very interested, overly interested in what was going on in Belinda's house when we were looking.
We make no allegations against the neighbour, and neither does Bruce. I'm revisiting the unsolved 1999 murder of Belinda Williams. To help me review the case, I'm calling on retired New South Wales Detective Chief Inspector Wayne Hayes. I've given him access to the same files I've been reading. What so far, having read those files, struck you about this particular murder?
I read the files and the coroner's findings. I agree with the coroner. I think it's a person known to Belinda. You've got the semi-rural location, you've got apparently no forced entry to the house, which means she either opens the door willingly or the person is able to get access, which means they know, is either known to her or they know how to get access.
The cause of death was identified as strangulation. Does that tell you anything about who would have killed her?
Yeah, manual strangulation indicates probably an unprepared offender. Their passion just reaches out and kills them for whatever reason.
I want to discuss the contamination of a potential crime scene. Belinda's house, in the hours after she disappeared. How many people all up would you have said was in the house?
I think at that time there would have been about a dozen people. The next door neighbour was there, David was there, Belinda's ex-partner, and then 4 and 5 who had both been there that night before.
There's a lot made of that by the deceased brother, okay? And I understand that because the offender could have actually been in that group of people. No doubt about that at all. On the other hand, that group of people are a group of friends, we keep it generic, who have turned up to help. You go to the house, it's not unusual, it's what you do when it's a missing person. Then you think, what do we do? People make cups of tea, they might do a bit of cleaning because that's what people do under strange circumstances when they don't know what they can do to help. They fall back into what they know.
If Belinda was killed in her home, I want to know why Wayne thinks the murderer didn't leave her body in the house.
The daughter could have found it, and you just never know. They may be concerned about that for whatever reason there may be. They may be concerned that their daughter did not find their mother's body. So they removed it a fair way, I think, to get it away from that house, bearing in mind I'm of the view that it's probably somebody that she knew.
There's another intriguing aspect to this murder investigation. Remember, Belinda's body was not found at the top of Mount Buninyong until 11 days after she went missing. She was found just down there. I can see where Belinda's family have marked the spot with a cross. Belinda's body had been dumped down a steep incline off the road. The hikers who discovered her were alerted when they saw a wind cheater on the side of the road. The wind cheater was later photographed by police, who were also interested in a number of footprints in close proximity.
There was an ident of a shoe impression obtained, and that wasn't able to be matched to any persons of interest. There was also some work done around the manufacture of that shoe to try and obtain the brand, etc. And I don't know how successful that was.
Investigators also wanted to know when the footprints were made, because the hikers often walk this access road, and yet they only spotted the wind cheater on the day the body was discovered.
Suggesting may have been that day or the day before that actually that wind cheater was placed there.
As an experienced investigator, what does that sort of trigger in your mind?
Maybe Belinda's been taken somewhere where she's been killed and her body's been kept at another location, and then the person responsible has then discarded her body up in the bush.
Was David Coventry's house searched in the period between the time she went missing and the time her body was found?
There are a number of premises searched as part of this investigation, and there was also a number of vehicles that were forensically examined.
As this is a live police investigation, Victoria Police are unable to disclose what they have discovered by means of DNA profiling. However, I'm sure the main items of interest to police at the time of Belinda's murder would have been the wind cheater, the blue nightgown, and the silver earrings. As time has gone by, have any of the DNA samples obtained been retested?
That's always a opportunity for investigators in cold cases with advancements in technology, and if we can do that, we will put that out to the lab for testing.
And that's ongoing?
Yes.
The unsolved murder of Belinda Williams has had a devastating impact on her family. My heart breaks for Belinda's daughter, who's had to navigate life without her mother's love from the age of 6. I can't imagine how tough that must have been for her.
She's a beautiful little girl, and she's like a mother, and we talk about her mother a lot, and she seems to like that.
Look, to be honest, she's an amazing young lady. She had a lot of love from her father and from my mother. They looked after her, and everybody around her. She's just a beautiful person, you know. She could easily have turned out to be someone really badly damaged.
Yeah.
but she isn't. She's a beautiful girl.
Belinda's daughter is now 30. And she's developed the skills her mother taught her in those early years. She's now a chef and recently returned from London, where she worked for several years. She's remained close to her father, David, who took sole custody following Belinda's murder. But David's relationships with Belinda's other family members became strained when he became a person of interest in her murder. In relation to David, you had a relationship with him growing up, etc. What since Belinda went missing and her subsequent murder, what's been that relationship like?
Oh, David and I were quite close, but we don't have. I haven't spoken to David for several years now.
More than 200 mourners attended the funeral service for Belinda Williams at the Holy Trinity Anglican Church in Buninyong.
Having to bury their daughter was the hardest thing that Belinda's parents ever had to do.
I know that my father was incredibly traumatised, and for me to ring my father to tell him that his daughter had been murdered was devastating.
It's a phone call you never thought you'd have to make in your life.
Never.
Yeah.
No.
The murder of Belinda Williams has been a particularly challenging case for Victoria Police. The length of time between when Belinda went missing and when her body was found meant there were 11 days before a homicide investigation could begin. So, in 2015, VicPol posted a massive reward for information in the hope of a breakthrough.
The mother of a woman murdered 16 years ago is hoping a $1 million reward will help catch her daughter's killer.
Cold case investigators have spent years scouring details of the murder with no major developments. They're now preparing to re-interview witnesses.
But in these type of investigations, it's like a big jigsaw puzzle. And you take a piece from here and a piece from there, and it doesn't really fit together. And someone might give you another piece, and it might fit in with this other piece. So no matter what you think you may or may not know, everything's important. Pick up the phone and call Crime Stoppers.
This is where we grew up, in this paddock. This is where we played and grew up.
This house and these fields, in the shadow of Mount Buninyong, are deeply entwined in Bruce's family history. Knowing his sister was murdered somewhere nearby has had a deeply unsettling effect on him and his family. How has that impacted on you?
It's not something that goes away. It's more the impact it's had on my mum.
What has the effect had on Shirley?
It's basically all she thinks about and talks about. Every year there's media conversations about it, well-meaning, but, you know, it brings it back again.
It's the only thing that I can do for Belinda now is to try and find her killer. Every year I've gone to the paper and, you know, they've done a story and been on local radio and always sort of appealed to people. Everybody's life's been ruined. Everybody's life's been ruined, and it should have been the best years of my life, and it's just been the absolute worst years. You know, we used to go out once a fortnight and have lunch and, you know, and I don't have any of that now. Still, after all these years, I still miss her terribly, and I just never sleep. And it doesn't matter who I go to, psychologist or counselling, they tell you how to get some sleep and think of nice things, but it always comes back to Belinda and, you know, thinking who killed her.
Shirley, what would be your final wish in life?
That someone will take the $1 million and think maybe it's time that they give us all some peace. I don't want to be on my deathbed and know that that would be what my last thoughts would be, and I don't want that.